Hello, fellow human light beings. This is Mahadeva, aka Michael Denny, aka the Thunder Wizard. And today I have a very special live stream I want to share with you. I'm entitling this, I channeled Rahu and he told me about the March 30th eclipse. So, that's a pretty big statement there saying that I'm channeling Rahu. But as I said before, I'm able to have some pretty good luck choosing to communicate with a lot of different beings ever since the ET experiences I've had. Sorry, I'm going to fix the light here. Let's see what we can do to make the light better. Oh, look at that. That's kind of cool. Let's turn this up. All right. Okay, so I channeled Rahu and he told me about the March 30th eclipse. People do not understand what you are, is what I said to him. And one of the things he said to me was, I only expand what you focus on. So I'm using the word channel. I'm not going to channel Rahu, go in trance and speak for him in this video. But I am going to communicate to you what he has said, what I felt, what my experience of him is. And in fact, just before I started this video, I was having a long interaction, communication with him. And I have to tell you that the power is really incredibly powerful, unbelievably powerful. And we're going to get into that. So this really is going to be focused on what you're going to need to know, what is going to be most important for you going into this March 30th eclipse. So let's see, do I have that here? Yeah, so this is the Vedic astrological chart for the eclipse on March 30th. So there's going to be a lunar eclipse earlier in the month, and then there's going to be the solar eclipse. So the lunar eclipse is going to get the mind prepared. And so between now, just starting now, and probably after this, things are going to be very intense. So if you've already begun to feel a lot of intense feelings, a lot of intense emotions, that is because of what is coming together right now. Now, what you're looking at here is, if you know how to read a Vedic chart, then you can see that we have a huge planetary conjunction in Pisces. So the number 12 there, you see all those letters in there. Those are abbreviations for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 planets. And then you have, where it says number 2 there, down below it, you see JU, which is Jupiter. And then in 3, which is Gemini, you see MA, which is Mars. And then if you look where it says number 6, you see KE, which is Ketu. Ketu is the south node of the moon, and Rahu is the north node of the moon. And Jupiter and Mars actually have an aspect. So Jupiter is using his 5th aspect, and he's hitting Ketu in Virgo there, which is number 6, the 6th sign. And Mars has his 4th aspect from Gemini there on Ketu. So that means all those planets in Pisces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, plus Jupiter and Mars, 9 planets. 9 planets have a direct aspect on Ketu. Ketu is the significator of leaving the third dimension and going into coming out of physical third dimensional manifestation. The sign 6, which is Virgo has to do with everyday third dimensional stuff having to do with your intellect, figuring out right from wrong, good and bad, duality. Virgo is about dealing with duality in the most spiritual way possible, but it means everyday normal stuff. And that's why Virgos are said to be very anal retentive, like that everything has to be in its proper place. You know, supposedly you walk into a Virgo house and everything is, you know, put away and everything is clean and the beds are made and everything is exactly where it belongs. This is one of the ways I know that Western astrology is wrong, because in Western astrology I'm a Virgo, but in reality I'm not. I am a Leo. So, you know, that whenever I would hear about, you know, Virgos are super, you know, I'm not that way. If you come into my house, you'll see everything scattered everywhere. I have a system for my mess, but I'm not at all about, I mean, look at kind of the clothes that I wear. I'm not all that. So this is, again, Vedic astrology, which is the accurate calculation of the stars in the sky. I don't recommend doing Western unless you do the sidereal zodiac Western, then you're fine. By the way, if you want to have a reading so that you can see how this is affecting your chart, you can go to astrology.thunderwizard.com, purchase a session from me or one of my astrologers. Okay, so what am I talking about here? This is about Rahu today. We're still talking about Rahu. So Rahu is a very interesting deity, and Rahu is in fact a deity. He is not a force. He's not a force of nature. He is in fact a person. So I have a bunch of stuff here that we're going to talk about. Whoops, in terms of who Rahu is. So you can see that Rahu is all these kinds of things that he's told me about himself and about this eclipse. So we're going to get into all of that. But, you know, he kind of asked me about why I chose that picture, because that's not what he looks like. He doesn't look like a demon at all, even though he is inaccurately called a demon. We'll talk about why that's inaccurate. The way Rahu, my experience of Rahu, when I reached out to him and wanted to communicate to him, actually, did I reach out to him? I must have. I must have sent out some kind of vibe that I wanted to talk to him. And I have personal reasons for that based on my chart and based on what's coming. And some communications that I received from light beings. And so anyway, I must have sent out an invitation to him because he showed up one day, and he was extremely, what's the word I want? Extremely polite and very respectful of my boundaries. And so I felt a presence. Sometimes it's hard to tell because I feel the energy, and I sometimes will feel what feels like anxiety, but it's really just my third dimensional body, you know, having a little bit of a conniption because something higher than the third dimension is coming in, and you know, it's making the third dimensional manifestation start to sort of, you know, come apart. And so I was feeling that, and I reached out and I said, "Is somebody here?" And I felt a being, a very pleasant, beautiful, kind. That's very important. A very kind, loving being. And I invited that. You know, I closed my eyes and was meditating, and I invited that being into my presence, into my energy, and what I saw was like kind of like a mist, a smoke, but there was a being there, and it was a very, what's the word I want to say? It was very, again, very respectful, very kind, and it was almost like, it had the movements of like a dancer, like this very beautiful, almost, like a ballet dancer. And the smoke and the mist sort of came in and moved around, and little bit of an outline of some kind of a being. You could tell it was a being. It wasn't masculine or feminine. I mean, I know that Rahu is technically masculine, but there was a lot of both masculine and feminine kinds of energy there, but also very refined, a very refined, powerful, but deeply aware, deeply intuitive, deeply compassionate, loving being. So why am I focusing on that? Because we're told that Rahu is a demon. We're told that Rahu is the equivalent of the Western devil, and I'm going to talk about why that's that happens, and it's why it's a misunderstanding. But even I, knowing what I know, that Rahu isn't those things, even I was taken aback at how refined and beautiful and kind and compassionate and extremely intelligent and deep this being was. And said that he was Rahu and that he was here to communicate with me. And maybe in later videos I'll tell you some of the things that he said, but he spent some time telling me about myself and how he was going to work directly with me in things that are coming up very soon, as a result of this this eclipse, and the empowerment that I was going to receive from it and all of that. And so I won't get into all of that, but that I think was kind of the main reason. But I was able to interact and communicate and experience what this being was and how important the nodes of the moon are. We treat the nodes of the moon, Rahu and Ketu, we treat the nodes of the moon as sort of these, we like to focus on the planets, we like to focus on Venus and the moon and Jupiter and, all the planets that give us physical 3D, resources and health and wealth and love. We focus on that, and we sort of focus on the nodes of the moon as just sort of these things that we have to deal with, and we try and work around them and not, have to interact with them. But the truth is that none of this that we experience, none of it would exist without the nodes. And so when you look at the Vedic astrological classical literature about the subject, if you do your job, you're going to find out pretty quickly that Rahu and Ketu are the most powerful of the astrological planets. Planet means that which moves in the sky, by the way. Planet does not mean ball of gas or ball of rock. It means that which moves around in the sky. And Rahu and Ketu are not things you can look up in the sky and see, but they are, we experience them as mathematical nodes, but they aren't. So I'm going to get into what they are and what Rahu really is. And as I'm sitting here, I can feel their power, because Rahu and Ketu are connected. They're the same being. We only experience them as different. Let me see, do I talk about that? I had to put a list together, but did I talk about, let's see. Yeah, I did. I talked about it. Okay, so we'll eventually get into that. All right, so I've shared this before, but we'll get started. So Rahu is a portal that brings conscious desire into manifestation. So Rahu is much more than that, but Rahu is the aspect that brings human beings literally into manifestation. And Ketu is the portal through which consciousness leaves the third dimensional reality. So one is an entrance and one is an exit. And that's why without them, nothing would function here. Nothing would happen. They are considered to be the most powerful of all of the planets. In fact, Ketu, in the chant to Ketu is said to be the head, which I don't know what the Sanskrit word is, but I'm assuming that that's a translation into English meaning the leader, the head of the planets. So Ketu is the leader of the planets. And Rahu, I guess Rahu then would be the initiator of all the planets. Anyway, all right, I'm starting to get lost. There's so much stuff going through my head. So Rahu is a portal that brings conscious desire into manifestation. All right, so I personally, I do not and have never enjoyed or gotten into, the typical, Bhagwan type of, East Indian, guru that walks around in a diaper, and I've just, that whole thing, I've always responded negatively to that. I've always responded to the idea that, a spiritual person is a person that doesn't have anything. And I find it to be so heavy-handed. And I find it to be so arbitrary. And it's really, what it is that's as much a costume as anything else. To walk around life in a diaper and, be naked. And here's the other thing. They're naked and they're supposed to be detached from their physical body, but many of them were just really overweight. So, they got to be eating a lot of food. You know what I'm saying? So on the one hand, they want to present themselves as I'm detached. That's why I have no clothes and I'm walking around in a diaper. But the fact that I'm extremely overweight, you can't get, they don't exercise. Their body looks horrible. But there was, for, 100 years ago, 75 years ago, that was the symbol of spirituality. And the idea was that you had no connection to the body, that the body was meaningless to you. And that to me is blasphemy. Because without your physical body, you cannot be here. And so to me, I always found that to be a costume, as much a costume as anything else, as fake and as superficial as anything else. And it was, what bothers me the most about it isn't so much that there are people that did that chose to make that huge statement. And again, it's not like the actual Aghori. The Aghori who actually sits in the smashan, in the burial grounds. The actual Aghori who's not there trying to get, be seen, who's doing practices, and he really is completely, totally disconnected from anything physical. But, the thing about Aghoris is they do their thing for a certain period of time, and then they achieve some siddhi, some power, and then they become normal humans again. And these gurus that walk around in diapers for their entire life, and the virtue signaling. This is what bothers me about it the most, is The followers are the ones that encourage them. The followers are encouraging them to continue to walk around in a diaper, continue to completely, disrespect and dissociate from their physical body, so that they don't have any, muscle tone, and they're fat and unable to walk, and they're completely unhealthy in that way. That's what bothers me about it. What bothers me about it is the virtue signaling of the followers. Because they themselves, the people that follow these people, they're not going to give up their clothes. They're not going to give up their homes. They're not going to give up their money and their jobs. So what they do is they virtue signal by following these people, and they objectify them by sending out the unspoken message of, yes, please walk around with no clothes on and make us feel guilty, make us feel less than, and then we can spiritualize and tell ourselves we're okay because we're following you, and you don't have a life and you don't have any money. Although, of course, we're buying these big, temples and centers where you can be there, and we pay for that. So you do end up having all this wealth around you, but your costume is to walk around in a diaper and pretend like you don't have anything. And it's I've always found it just so obscene, and I don't buy into it. So what does this have to do with Rahu? Rahu is the being that is focused. Actually, Rahu isn't focused. Rahu is a focus for souls that are coming into 3D physical reality. Rahu becomes the focus and focuses their desire. And that includes your physical body. Like for me personally, I think that if you want to be a spiritual person, you've got to take care of your physical body. It's just ridiculous not to do that. How can you possibly channel energy? How can you possibly communicate and interact energetically with the gods and with the spirits and with your own spirit if your antenna, which is your physical body, the nervous system, the organs, if these things aren't working well, there's no way that you can have a functional spiritual reality. So to take that further, you cannot be a spiritual person if you are not engaged in your desires with this world. That's why, my main teaching is to find out what your soul desire is and then to do everything in your power to manifest it. So this, to me, again, is something that I appreciate. This is something that I revere about Rahu, because Rahu focuses on that. Now, again, Rahu is seen as a demon who brings out obsession and addiction, but that's not what Rahu does. That comes about only because of your focus, your attachment, and your actions. And I've come to realize by communicating with this being that Rahu is not in any way responsible for the negativity that you manifest in your life. That doesn't mean that in your chart, if you see Rahu placed in a certain way with certain aspects, that there isn't something you need to be aware of. Like there might be a really strong potential for addiction or obsession or even becoming a criminal or worse. But Rahu's not doing that. We do that. So, and I just got hit as I said that. How does that happen? And why is this important? Because to get to 5D, to get to the higher frequency that we want to get to, we will have to master our understanding of what Rahu is. Because Rahu in higher dimensions is even more powerful than he is down here. And so if you can't consciously interact with your desires. Again, I'm destroying the spiritual mythology that when you achieve your spiritual state, you will have no more problems, you'll be full of bliss, and there will be no desires. It's just nonsense. It's absolute, complete, utter nonsense. Higher dimensional frequencies, your desires are going to be even more intense. Your emotions will be even more intense. So we won't get there unless we know how to elevate our desires. In fact, increase them. Being attached, that's something else. That's not the same. We conflate attachment with desire, and it's not the same. Now, if you are attached, you will have desires. Your desires have now become attached on a lower frequency. So it is true that, if you are attached, it means that you're being beat to hell by your desires. But having a desire does not mean that it has to be attached. You don't have to be attached to them. And this is the razor's edge that we must walk in the third dimension. To have all of our feelings, all of our desires, all of our thoughts, all of our reactions, and not be attached to them, and take actions that will bring about our true fulfillment and cause healing and enlightenment and awareness to ourselves and all other conscious beings. And the idea that the way to do that is to get rid of all of your desires is just pure nonsense. Absolute, it's blasphemous. Desire is I'll tell you this, my experience in higher dimensions has led me to believe that desire is in fact the driving force of consciousness. Without desire, there is no consciousness. Consciousness emerges because of desire. And again, Rahu is not desire. This is one thing I found about Rahu. Communicating experience with Rahu. Rahu has desires because Rahu is a conscious being, but his desires are not what we think they are. His desire is he wants to bring, he very much wants to bring clarity, wisdom, and awareness to, I can't even put the word to it, to our interactions, our focus, our lives, our experiences. That's the only thing he wants. He doesn't want anything else. He gets his fulfillment from bringing that about. But he's also willing to go to whatever lengths is necessary in order to bring that about in you. But you're the one that does it. Whatever experiences you have, you are completely responsible for. That's why I said here, people don't understand you. And he says, I only expand what you focus on. All right, so let's talk a little bit more here. So Rahu is a portal that brings conscious desire into manifestation. Rahu is a magnifying lens that expands whatever comes into his aura. So I couldn't find the right words for it in one sentence, but the picture I got as I was interacting with him and trying to merge my mind with him and communicate with him is, imagine a magnifying glass. So, if you place if I had a magnifying glass right here and I was, doing this, it would distort whatever it was, you were looking at it through. So you look through it, and whatever comes back to you is going to be magnified and distorted, right? My face is, it's like a funhouse mirror. And so that is not the actual thing. So it's not like a microscope that's showing you the depths inside what you're looking at. No, what you're seeing is you're seeing a distorted, magnified view of whatever it is that you are focusing on, whatever you're looking at. So if we go here to the sorry, there's so much energy flowing through me, it's hard to talk. If we look here at the astrological chart, so Rahu is at 2 degrees. So Rahu is closest to Venus. Saturn comes in at the very end, and Saturn is also very close to Rahu. But Rahu is extremely close to Venus. So this is important. This tells us a lot. And Venus retrograde, no less. So what would that mean? In the case of Venus, by the way, well, I'll talk about that later. Venus is a teacher. Venus teaches Rahu. All right, so Rahu is a magnifying glass, and whatever comes, into his influence, he magnifies it. It doesn't mean that that thing actually grows to that level. It means that your view of it expands. Your experience of it expands. So there's the illusion. Rahu does bring an illusion, but it's not a lie. He's not lying to you. He's expanding whatever he's focused on. So Venus, what are the things that Venus is associated with? First, let me tell you what Venus is. This is my experience of Venus. Venus is seen as both a god or a goddess. We'll talk about her like she's a goddess, the feminine aspect of Venus. By the way, all of the planets have both a masculine and a feminine. It's true with the gods as well, but the planets especially. So the feminine aspect of Venus, she represents love. She represents friendship. She represents fulfillment. She represents pleasant sensual experience. She represents lovemaking. She represents groups of people, relationships, family, friends, groups of friends. She represents wine, represents music, art. All of these things are what? They are physical interaction and experience with the third dimension. Now, we call the third dimension Maya, which means illusion. So, since Venus is a goddess, she knows that it's an illusion. So she's not unaware of that. She knows that this is an illusion. She knows it's not real. She knows that beyond this veil is a truth, which we call spirituality, which we call higher dimensions, which we call God, the source, spirit, whatever you want to call it. She knows that the third dimension is not spirit. She knows that. She's not stupid. She knows it's illusion. And what she does is she worships the spirit that is behind this illusion. And she uses this illusion as a way to show her devotion, her love, her worship of the non-physical. It is, a theater. It's a play. But what do plays do? I was an actor. You go watch a play. It used to be movies, but movies. You go watch a good play, all of your emotions will come to life, and you will vicariously learn about and experience your own life experiences. You will get close to your true self through this illusion. So Venus knows that this created world is a beautiful piece of art that is designed to evoke a deeper experience of the spirit realm. Right, so Rahu magnifies and distorts. He doesn't do that. It's just that's what happens when he goes over something and you look at that thing. His influence on your perception is that you see it becoming expanded and distorted. You experience it. Your feelings of it become expanded and distorted. This is why Rahu is associated with drugs. Rahu is especially associated with THC. And if you know what THC does, it magnifies whatever you're focused on. That's why Rahu is associated with that. So that means that if Rahu has a connection with Venus, it means that those desires within you will become expanded. They will become inflamed. They might even become distorted. And that is an experience. So an intensification of whatever it is, love, food, pick whatever the Venus thing we're talking about here. Your experience of that becoming expanded, it only becomes an issue when you make the decision, when you choose to become attached to that. When you become attached to that experience where it becomes expanded, then you can run into addiction. Then you get distorted. You get a distorted understanding. You get a distorted importance. And what happens is you forget that let's say it's food. That Venus loves food. Venus doesn't love gluttony. Venus is always seen as a beautiful, slender, so she's not gluttonous. But she enjoys, if she's going to eat something, she enjoys the taste of that. She wants to have satisfaction, but that's just enjoying whatever it is. Rahu comes between you and Venus in terms of, let's just say, food. Rahu comes in between you and that. It becomes expanded. So you have the opportunity at that point to have an expanded experience, the taste. But you're the one that then chooses to become attached and becomes addicted, and you're the one that says, I'm going to eat more. I'm going to eat until I can't stop. Interesting brought up marijuana, because that's what marijuana does. THC, it makes people unable. By the way, it's an actual thing. THC cuts off the ability of the brain to know when the stomach is full. It's an actual thing. That's why people just eat and eat and eat on THC. And that's one of the reasons initially, by the way, the level of THC that is in weed now is absolutely, absurdly far beyond what it was. Naturally, the reason why they call it weed is because it grew like a weed wild. And for instance, the Taoists, the traditional Chinese medicine, the TCM people, if there was something that needed to be balanced, THC could raise that with a little bit of fire. And if somebody needed to eat, for example, but the percentage of THC in literally the weed that they would pull out of the ground would be like 3% or 5%. And what is it now? Like 20%, 30%? So I know, potheads like to say that, weed is used in traditional Chinese medicine, but it was only used, such a small amount. And just like in instances like in case somebody needed to eat or, needed to get the qi flowing, just a little bit. Anyway, so that's why, again, Rahu is associated with that, because then people who want that experience, what do? They create weed that's so powerful. It's just absurdly powerful. But it's your choice. If you're able to experience what Rahu brings and not become attached and not become indulgent, then you can have a life-changing experience one time with something. All right, let's keep going. So Rahu has no personal desires. He is curious to explore yours. There's a series on, now it's on Apple TV. I don't know where it was originally. Maybe it was originally there, but it's called Hannibal. And if you know, it's Hannibal Lecter. But it's a completely, totally inaccurate representation of a sociopath and a psychopath. And this is our projection, by the way. The reason why people like to go see movies about psychopaths and sociopaths is because they secretly want to be masterful and in control. So it's a myth, actually, that psychopaths and sociopaths have this mastery of reality, and they're 100 moves ahead of you, and they're sociopathic, so they don't have any anger or any reaction. It's our fantasy. That's why we watch it. Truth of the matter is that psychopaths and sociopaths are deeply, deeply full of rage and fear and anger, and they make huge mistakes, and they don't have this window and understand human beings perfectly. Like the idea that a sociopath is going to come and is going to know you so well, they'll know how to manipulate you and get around. It's nonsense. The only people that get deluded by sociopaths are victims, people who unconsciously want to be abused. The truth is that somebody who's connected to themselves, they see a psychopath or a sociopath coming a mile away, because they're actually very, very bad at what it is that they do. Why did I bring that up? Because in that series, Hannibal Lecter is presented this way, like he has no emotions. Actually, he shows a lot of emotions and a lot of empathy, interestingly enough, in that. He actually cries lots of times when he thinks something is beautiful. And he only kills because he thinks the person is rude and he's trying to make a point. And the big thing is, the manipulation and the abuse that he does to the empath in that is he kept saying, I was curious to see what you were going to do next, which is nonsense. Psychopaths and sociopaths have a huge personal agenda coming out of their deep need, and they desperately need to have what they want. So this idea that they're aloof and detached and they're only watching because they're curious is nonsense. However, that is true about Rahu. Rahu is, again, his main thing is he wants to help you become evolved. That is what he wants more than anything else. He feels a deep connection to your true essence, and he wants to see you evolve. And he's willing to do whatever it takes to help you. And you have to cooperate with him. So if in your chart Rahu's in a certain place that makes you supposedly a drug addict, that's only because you chose that. Rahu didn't make that happen to you. You chose that. But that's because you had a desire on a soul level to go into that and make that happen. And Rahu says, I'm interested to see where you go with this. I'm interested to see how you use this to eventually find your consciousness. But he doesn't, I was wrong before. He won't put temptation in front of you. He doesn't do that. All of the temptation completely comes from you, 100%. You are fully responsible for everything that you are tempted and you choose to do. So he has no personal desires. He's curious to explore yours, though. So if you come into this world with a desire, I've got a desire for surfing. It's never enough, by the way. Never enough. There will never be enough waves for me. I've got a strong connection with wanting to reach the masses. And it won't matter how many people I connect with, it'll never be enough. Rahu's in my 11th house in Gemini, which is all about communicating to the masses and connecting to the collective awareness, the collective consensus, the collective unconscious. As you know, that's what I talk about. I definitely have a gift for that. And it's never enough. So I have to learn how to just let that go. But from Rahu's perspective, his perspective is, I'm curious to see for you what happens with that. Now, Rahu also has as a result, he has a connection and a desire to experience the collective as well. So it works out, he and I are, we're on the same path. But he actually is a detached, he has no agenda with you, and his desire for you is that you achieve awareness, but he has a curiosity, and he's very curious to see what you will do with your perception of your interaction with the Maya, this illusion. Will you find enlightenment through it, or will you get trapped in it? And he has no judgment. If you make the decision that you want to become attached and trapped and addicted and obsessed, he will be there with you and he will watch it with you. But he has no judgment over it. He won't try and talk you out of it because he knows the only way out is through. And you have two choices. You can either choose to follow the path of your soul, which will be the path of not indulging in your obsessions and your addictions. Or you can choose to let them pull you in, and then you can become completely attached to that. And either way, he will stay with you through that experience. He will stay with you through that experiment. Rahu is a student of Venus. We already talked about that. Rahu is very curious about experience of the 3D illusion. We already talked about that. Rahu and Ketu are one being called Svarbhanu, an extremely powerful serpent. So you know the myth. I've told you this myth a long time. So what happens in the beginning of the creation, and by the way, this is actually what's happening in the human being continuously. The myth is that this is the beginning of creation, and that's not really what the beginning of creation is. It's a metaphor for what's going on inside of you all the time. And because we manifest the world, we literally manifest the world every nanosecond with our focus and our intentions and our actions and our desires and our attachments. We create literally our entire reality, including our physical reality. So according to the mythology, the celestial gods, which represent your non-physical spiritual self, your soul, if you will, the celestial deities and the terrestrial deities, which the Vedics inaccurately call demons. They also inaccurately call them asuras. Because the truth is that the word asura originally meant spiritual power. It didn't mean good or evil, it just meant spiritual power. And it's the same word that is used by the Germanics. They use the word Aesir. It's the exact same word. Asura, Aesir. It means spiritual power. But the celestial gods in the Germanic tradition are called the Asuras. And the terrestrial gods, or the gods of space-time, are called the Vanir, the Wanes. And the word fun comes from that root of van, means to experience and enjoy third-dimensional reality. So we have two beings, the Devas and the Asuras in the Vedic. So the Devas decide that they have to work with the Asuras, the gods of space-time. They have to work with them in order to create the elixir of immortality. That means in order for you to achieve spiritual immortality, you must have an interaction with both your spiritual self and your 3D space-time self. If you make the judgment, and I think this is where the Hindu religion goes off, they make a judgment about it, and they call them, asuras, and it's translated as demons, and in fact it's often thought of that way. But it's an inaccurate understanding, and it shows our judgment of our own desires. I was talking about in the beginning, how people used to worship these guys that have no muscle tone, that are really overweight, that walk around in diapers and don't own anything but get a lot of donations so that they can have big, temples and things like that. I mean, the fact that people need to follow people like that, they actually need that so that they can on the one hand virtue signal, look at how spiritual I am, I'm following this completely out of shape fat guy in a diaper, and but I feel guilty. That's how I'm spiritual. I feel guilty for the fact that I'm not willing to do what that person is doing, right? False spirituality. How did I get on that? I don't know. I forgot what I was saying. Svarbhanu is an extremely powerful serpent. So the myth is that there's the celestial deities, the Devas, have to work with the Asuras, and they have to stir up the ocean of milk in order to get out the nectar of immortality. And the celestial deities, they decide they are going to commit a conspiracy against the poor demons. That's ironic, don't you think? The demons aren't looking to they're not looking to lie, they're not looking to steal. The celestial gods are looking to steal. They're stealing the elixir of immortality. So in order to do that, they have to use Svarbhanu. I believe I'm getting this right. They have to use a serpent. And he makes himself stiff like a board, which is the spinal column. And so they both, it takes the strength of both the celestial deities and the 3D space-time deities. They have to move it together. They have to stir the ocean of milk. And then from that, the nectar of immortality comes to the top. And then the celestial deities decide they're going to take that and they're only going to give it to themselves. And so they have to figure out a way how to steal it from the Asuras, the space-time deities, the deities of 3D reality, 3D experience. And so what they do is they tell Vishnu, which represents the soul, they tell Vishnu says, hey, I know what I'll do. I will transform myself into a beautiful belly dancer. And so he transforms himself into this beautiful woman in a bikini, and just everything just unbelievably, wow, look at that. And while she's dancing and shaking her booty in front of the poor asuras who are just they can't believe what they're looking at. They've completely forgotten about the nectar of immortality. He goes around and he gives it to all the celestial deities in the hope that they'll drink it all, so that the asuras won't get any. But there's a serpent. I think it's Svarbhanu. I believe it is. Svarbhanu has already gotten a boon. Again, this is the spinal column. The serpent is the spinal column, the kundalini. The serpent has gotten a boon from Brahma, who says you will be allowed to do it. I give you permission. So he sits in between what? The sun and the moon. Two halves of the brain. The intellectual and the emotional. He sits between the sun and the moon, the soul and the mind. And so Vishnu goes around, he gives it, I don't know which one he gives it first, either the sun or the moon, I don't know. And let's say it's the sun. The sun drinks, gives it over to Svarbhanu. As Svarbhanu is drinking, the sun and the moon both look at him and see him, and they yell, he's a demon, kill him. And so Vishnu takes out his chakra, his round weapon, and cuts off the head of Svarbhanu as he's swallowing the nectar of immortality. And then what ends up happening, and who knows what happens, I imagine that the nectar of immortality falls to the ground and it goes spilling everywhere. I don't know. Or maybe whoever it is, somebody else catches it and starts drinking it. I don't know. But he is now immortal, but he is separated from his head and his body. And so the head becomes Rahu, Ketu is, the head becomes Rahu, and Ketu is the body, the headless body. Now the truth is, this being is not headless. It's not two beings, it's one being. So what is it that cuts him in half like that? I'm going to tell you, because I saw it. I've seen this before, but they showed it to me again. Rahu showed me again who he really was. And I saw what it is that we perceive as him being split in two. And let me make it clear about our experience of Rahu is backwards. It's backwards because we live in a backwards reality. The third dimension is an upside down backwards reality. That's why in the third dimension, this is why people think that there are false beings of light trapping them in reincarnation. That's why people believe that there's a devil that's more powerful than you. This is why the deep state can easily lie to you and create these beings that they make you believe are extraterrestrials that they use to actually abduct people and torture them and experiment on them. Those are real things, but in order to fool you, they create these false extraterrestrials, which are people in suits or actual remote-controlled androids or actual AI androids. They're machines, and or they use all kinds of technology and drugs and things like that to make you think you're seeing something that you're not, or literally project into your brain things that aren't there. And so, those are very extremely sophisticated and convincing technologies, and so the people who've been abducted, they have every reason to believe it, but it's a total lie. But the reason why people want to believe that, because, one of the things that just absolutely floors me is Dr. Stephen Greer has, and I put links into my videos. You can go and look at all of his documents. He has more documentation of what is really going on. He has proof of all of this, all of the fake alien invasion, fake alien abductions, all this stuff that we've been told, that, the fact that we've already created 0-point energy, that we have already created spaceships and all of that stuff. He has incredible proof. He has testimony from over 750 whistleblowers. But what blows my mind is that nobody pays attention to it. I mean, he's been on all kinds of podcasts, and nobody pays attention to it. There's a reason why. It's because people don't want to know the truth. People don't want to know that the truth of reality beyond the third dimension is bliss and love. And that their essence is that they are a light being, that they are God. Why would somebody not want to know that? Because if you become aware of that, your third dimensional reality starts coming apart and you feel like you're dying. So people don't want to know that. What helps people stay alive is fear, feeling victimized, feeling insecure. That's why we still do this money thing. The truth is that, I just got a letter from the IRS today, so I know this feeling comes up in me. But the truth is that if people just decided to stop using money, there is no force on the planet that could force you to use it. If 25% of the population said, I'm not doing this money thing anymore, you know what, I'm going to have my own farm, and I'm going to have my own this, and, I'll trade you eggs and whatever for your skill in technology and creating things, and because we do that now, we trade services now. But we use this thing called money, which is really used as a means of enslavement. And it is a choice because it's not natural. It's a game. It's sometimes it makes me laugh, but it's just a game. I went to the store today and I bought some stuff. You know what I did is I pulled out a piece of plastic and I touched a thing, and I went, and then I put it back in my wallet, and then they said okay, and then they gave me the stuff that I wanted. And we both pretended that I gave them something in exchange for the food. I didn't give them anything. They got nothing from me. The actual physical reality is that there's this big place that has a bunch of food, and anybody can go in and you can walk out with as much food as you want if you're willing to play pretend. And pretend like I'm going to give you something in exchange for that. But if we got rid of the money altogether, the labor that goes into making the food and bringing it to the store, that is still just as real with or without money. Why do we choose to do it? We could choose to stop doing that. Why do we choose to do it? Because we don't want to wake up. We don't want to stay out of our cozy, safe little cell, our prison cell. This is why people want to believe that light beings have the ability to trap them in the reincarnation jail, prison planet. They want to believe that. Not because it feels good, but because it's safe. I can tell you from personal experience, going outside of the third dimension does not feel safe at first. Because you don't understand it, and we fear what we don't understand. We can't control what we don't believe we understand. So for us to shift, we're all going to have to grow up out of that that infantile need to be placed in, a Monopoly game and pretend it's real. Until we're willing to do that, we won't shift. So what's happening now with this eclipse that we're happening, this planetary conjunction and both the lunar and the solar eclipse, is that the veil is going to come off. Now, how people choose to respond to it, that's their own decision. But the opportunity is there. If you want to let go of the game, the opportunity is going to make itself happen. But it's up to you to decide where you want to go with it. It's completely your decision. All right, where was I? So Rahu and Ketu are one being called Svarbhanu, an extremely powerful serpent. So let's see, and I said something else after that. I saw Svarbhanu in higher dimensions. He is a beautiful light being serpent. So what I saw was this bright, beautiful being, and he was just this amazing serpent dragon made out of light. One of the most beautiful, most powerful beings I've ever seen. One of the most loving, one of the most kind, one of the most liberating beings I've ever experienced. So why is Rahu and Ketu, why are they seen as being these evil demons? Because, as I've said, higher dimensions destroy. Energy from the higher dimensions destroy the third dimensional cohesion of the game. So this is why, if Rahu is looking at Venus in your chart, let's say, for example, then there's a possibility you might become a love addict, a porn addict, something like that. You might not be able to stay, faithful to your partner, something like that. But again, that's just your reaction to the enhanced experience of Venus in your chart. You have an enhanced experience of it, and then you make the decision to indulge in it, become attached. Instead of just like, if you're going to have like the best, somebody's going to hand you the best, drug experience ever, and you can only have it once in your life, and once you do it, you experience it, and then it's gone. Addicts will tell you this, that like nothing is ever as good as the first time that they did whatever the drug is that they're addicted to. And every time you do it, you're trying to get back to that first time. It's never the same. So what happens if you just did it once and appreciated it and went, oh, good, that was nice. I'm going to appreciate that and accept that for what it is, and I know it's never going to happen again, so I'm just not even going to bother trying. I'm just going to enjoy that. That would be the conscious experience of Rahu. So we see Rahu as a demon because of the demon within us. The part of us that becomes the demon when we can't just experience and accept whatever we get. We can't enjoy it. It's because we live in this upside down, backwards, third dimensional reality, which again is completely backwards. So if Rahu and Ketu are seen as demons here, that means in higher dimensions they are even more beautiful and more spiritual. They're that much more amazing and wonderful and the exact opposite. But you take that higher dimensional energy, and if it comes into the third dimension, it will have a destructive effect on the cohesion of the third dimensional reality, which is based on self-devaluation, self-hatred, isolation, all of that. So that means that there is a reality where if you experience this being from a purely spiritual perspective, you will have it will be an awakening experience, not an attachment. It won't attach you, it'll awaken you. So how is it that Rahu and Ketu, how is it that Svarbhanu gets cut in half? And this has to do with differing dimensions. What it means is that Rahu's, or the head of Svarbhanu, actually pokes into the third dimension. So it looks like a head that's been decapitated. He's not. He's connected to the rest of his body, but you don't know that. You can't see that. Now, of course, Rahu isn't a physical being that we can see. Rahu is he's like a mist, a smoke, and he's a mathematical point. But do your best to take that and just accept that. It's just what's happening is that there's a higher dimensional being that pokes his head into the third dimension. And so what about the tail? So that means that there's a part of Svarbhanu that is in the third dimension, which we experience as his body. And why is his body headless? Because the snake is completely connected, except that, his head, he's in a higher dimension. He's a higher dimensional being. His head pokes into the third dimension and his tail pokes into the third dimension. And so those two are coming into the third dimension from different points. And so we don't see the whole being. We see the tail over there. We see the head over there. Sorry. And so from our perspective, we see this as two beings, Rahu and Ketu. But the picture that, I guess it was Svarbhanu, what this being showed me was that, if I can remember his words were, I bring you into manifestation and I stay with you until you exit. So what I saw that is like Rahu is this force, and like, let's say this is the soul. Soul says, I want to go into 3D. And so Rahu says, oh my gosh, I want to be on that journey with you. I'm curious to see how you get through it. So he pushes the being, and imagine the third dimension is like a film right here. Pushes the being, goes into the third dimension, and of course then Rahu pushes the being through life, and then it has to come back. And so then Rahu comes back, and then what do you see? As Rahu is pushing the being back, the soul back into higher dimensions, what do you see? You see the tail come around. So the head comes through, pushing a soul through, and then pushes the soul back out, and then you see the tail follow behind. So we think it's a tail, but it's not. We associate the tail with death. Death doesn't exist. There is no such thing. Death is our experience of what? Nobody listening to me has ever died completely. Because if you did, you wouldn't be here. The definition of death is for this third dimensional meat bag to completely exit the third dimension forever and never come back. If you die and come back, that's called having a near-death experience. You didn't actually die. But when you die, you never come back. We think they're gone forever because we're isolated. But that being, the physical body can't leave the third dimension, so it stays behind, and the soul goes through the barrier. But it's that same being. That same being brings you into reality and then takes you out of reality. But it's the same being. All right, Rahu and Ketu are malefic only to the 3D attached mind. So, Ketu is evil, is malefic to your attachment to the third dimension. So now this can be very challenging, very challenging. So wherever Ketu is in your chart, you're going to have to let go of whatever it is it's associated with. You might have to do a lot of spiritual work, and some of it is really difficult. So in some cases, Ketu is associated with Venus, and when that happens, and don't think just because you have Ketu close to your Venus that this is going to be true for you. Somebody has to be able to look at the chart, and it has to have certain things going on. But what can happen, let's say if Ketu is associated with Venus in a certain way, that person will be incapable of romantic love. They might have zero desire for it. Or they will experience it, and as soon as they experience it and they enjoy, they fall in love with somebody. As soon as they fall in love, all of a sudden they just lose all interest and everything just falls apart. They might be emotionally or mentally damaged to the point where they're incapable. Like they might be borderline or narcissist, or have some kind of dissociation or attachment disorder. Ketu can very well be associated with that. And so that person would then have to go, in this lifetime, I need to do a lot of spiritual work around the idea of romantic love. So, for me, Ketu is in my 5th house, which the 5th house has to do with children. I've never had any desire for children, ever. The thought of it is, I'm repulsed by the idea of actually having a kid. I love kids, don't get me wrong. I love being around them, but the fact, having them and raising them, there's no part of me that wants that. That's where Ketu is sitting in my 5th house, and the 5th house has to do with children. And Ketu, in my experience, you will have a mastery over something, but you will not be able to hang on to it and use it in a way that you can use for reputation or money or wealth or anything like that. But you will have a mastery of it. So 5th house is what? It's what I used to be. I used to be an actor. And I was as good as they came. I was as good as any of them. And I was a screenwriter and a playwright. But what would happen is when I would go and perform, if I was doing, it didn't matter if I was doing a film or, I would do a great job, but afterwards it would destroy me. And sometimes I'd be in bed for a week after, doing a performance. And it's because Ketu it brings death to you. And so, now the thought of, trying to do that for a living sounds, but I have a mastery of it. And I've always had a mastery of it. So there are times when people will be given an opportunity, if they're given an opportunity to do the thing that Ketu has given them mastery over, they might be very famous or very rich or very successful, but they won't have any attachment to it. And they'll be like, I'm looking forward to when I can stop doing this. So Ketu takes that attachment away from whatever it is, wherever he's placed. And again, what is that? It means that in a previous life, that's where your Rahu was. So that means in a previous life, again, I could get into it. In a previous life, it means that I really wanted to master those things. It must have been a life when I really wanted to have kids. And I did it and I mastered it. And then once you mastered it, you go, oh, okay, I've done that. Now I don't need to do that anymore. Which is, by the way, what Rahu wants. Rahu wants to take you on a journey. You say, Rahu, I want to go into the third dimension and I really want to experience being a parent. And Rahu goes, that sounds awesome. I will take you into the third dimension. And I want to come along and watch you as you experience this thing that you really want to do. And I will empower you with the ability to have that as your goal in life, your aspiration. And so Rahu can expand your ability to aspire to something. Rahu does give that. That's part of what happens when you look through the lens that Rahu becomes. But the end goal is for you to achieve mastery in that, to achieve fulfillment in that, and then go, oh, okay. All right, well, I've done that now, and I can do something else now. So there must have been a life when I had kids and I really achieved it, and then afterwards I went, okay, I've done that. I don't need to do that anymore. The tail end. So the head comes around, and then when it goes back in, the tail is left. And so where the tail is in your chart, which is Ketu, it means that your soul has already gone back into higher dimensions, and the tail is swishing as it goes through the barrier. So it's swishing. The tail is swishing over whatever that is in your chart. And so you will either not have any desire for it, or if you do choose to do it, it will never work out for you, or it will feel disastrous, or it will take your life energy away from you. You'll feel depleted, and you'll lose any desire for that. So Rahu and Ketu are malefic only to the 3D attached mind. In 5D, Svarbhanu is a very kind and highly spiritual being. I already talked about that. The Asura experience of Rahu is only the reaction of the attached mind. So we've already talked about that. If you become attached to whatever Rahu is expanding for you, because he's trying to do you a favor. He said, no, you said that you wanted X, Y, and Z. I'm going to focus on that so you can really experience it. I want you to experience it. I want you to achieve fulfillment in it. Because I want you then to realize that what's beyond that is the spirit. Because I am a higher dimensional being, and I can tell you it's much more beautiful up here in the higher dimensions than the third dimensional experiment you want to have is designed to give you an even greater experience in higher dimensions. I want to get you back there. So yeah, I want to magnify it for you so that you can be successful in having that experience. But then again, you become attached. We've talked about that. That's your doing. You can choose not to do that. If someone has no attachment to illusion, Rahu is a benevolent teacher. So I don't know that this has ever happened, but it's possible. If you were able to go through all of your lives and not become attached to your aspirations, your intense desires, if you were able to just experience it and not become attached, then what would happen is you would be the most conscious person on the planet, and you would experience and learn on a very deep level. So this is why, as I've said in the past, Rahu, if you don't become attached, will then say, let me show you what's behind the veil. And then you can learn everything. Because Rahu is a scientist and is a master of understanding this third dimensional video game. And if you want that, you can have it. But it means you have to face your deepest desires. You have to face your obsessions and experience them and not take actions which will attach you to it. You have to have all of your thoughts, all of your feelings, all of your responses, and still take action that is associated with what is best for you and best for others. That is enlightenment. I'm going to give you the definition of enlightenment. And anybody, it doesn't matter how smart, how stupid, how spiritual, how evil, it doesn't matter. If anybody follows this to the letter, they will be in a state of enlightenment. And that is simply this. If you have all of your thoughts, like you don't push anything down, there's no thought that you push away from yourself or that you're unwilling to look at, because thoughts are just reactions to stimulus. People, you hear people talking about control your thoughts. That's ridiculous. You can choose to indulge in a thought or not indulge in a thought, but you can't control them. Your thoughts are reactions. A thought rises. That is this is that. It's a reaction and a judgment based on an observation, a stimulus that you had, and you had a reaction to it. And then you had a thought. That's all that it is. It's just your intellect. Your intellect is a defense mechanism. It's primarily to help you survive the third dimension so you can figure out the difference between left and right, up and down. But then we become trapped in our intellect, highly, highly intellectual people, and they can't attach to their feelings, but they can talk things. These are people who are running away from their feelings. It's a defense mechanism. So having all of your thoughts without being attached to them or the conclusions that they come to. Again, on my channel, I've told you, I don't know how many, if you've been on my channel for long enough, you've heard me say, I was wrong about. I got plenty of videos where I say, I was wrong about. It's one of the reasons I do that is because I don't want to be attached to my thoughts. I want to have them, so I don't have any regret over opinions that I've had or strong opinions that I've had in the past, because you can't go through life and not have opinions and feelings and thoughts. I don't have to be attached to them. I don't have to stick with any of them. At least that's my goal. So you have to have all of your thoughts. You have to have all of your feelings. Feelings are also reactions to things. And this is the biggest stumbling block. The question I get from people the most is, how do I get over fill in the blank? How do I get over my fear? How do I get over my anger? And I always say the same thing. I say, when did I ever tell you were supposed to get over anything? You're not supposed to get over your feelings. You're supposed to experience them. But you have to take actions that are conscious. So what people do is, the worst thing you can do is to not have a feeling. If you push a feeling down into your unconscious mind, you will act on that feeling. That's when a feeling becomes an impulse. This is an addiction. People are addicted. They can consciously tell themselves, I'm never going to drink again. I'm never going to drink again. I'm never going to drink again. Doesn't matter what you say to yourself. It won't stop the impulse. It's because there's a feeling in there that they're unwilling to experience. And it might be a really horrible, traumatic, usually a traumatic experience, self-devaluing experience from childhood, or whatever. Could be anything. But you're supposed to feel it. But while you have the feeling, you then have to have the consciousness, which is really, you can't have the narcissism that is focused just on making yourself feel better. You have the feeling, positive or negative, and then you ask yourself, what is the action that I need to take that is best for me and best for the other person? And sometimes that action will be directly contrary to the desire that you have. A good example is if you're in love, let's say you're in love with a woman, and you guys date and start to go somewhere, and then she meets somebody else. And then to your to your deep, horrible sadness, she ends up creating a connection with that person, and she comes to you one day and she says, I'm sorry, I can't, date you anymore. I've fallen in love with somebody else. Well, that's going to be a horrific feeling. I know, I've been there. I'm sure everybody listening to me has had that experience. It's going to be a horrific feeling. And you can do all kinds of things. You can get angry, you can try, you can guilt them, you can, try and do things to keep the relationship going. Or you can think to yourself, if I was in her position, I would want to have the freedom to go after that. And so the most difficult thing to do would be to say, if you could honestly say this, a lot of people say this, but what they're doing is they're actually trying to guilt them back into the relationship. But if you could do this without any agenda, and you said, I understand, I'm going to miss you, it's going to hurt like hell, but I want you to be happy. And if you're going to be happier with him, then I support that. That would be acting in consciousness. All of your impulse would be telling you to do something else. What do you think crimes of passion are? They don't hate the person they're killing. They love the person, but they can't tolerate the thought of them leaving them. So what do? They kill them. That's what, I forget his name, the serial killer. One of the serial killers out there. The guy who, cannibalized his victims. What would happen is he would fall in love with some guy. They'd be in his apartment and he'd fall in love with the guy. He'd feel an attraction to them, and the guy would look at his watch and go, I have to go home. And the thought of that person leaving him was so devastating, he'd conk him over the head, kill him, and then freeze him and eat him. Because he wanted him. He wanted to be close to him. He loved him. People act selfishly and abusively out of a desire for connection. Ironically. I forgot what got me onto that. So if someone has no attachment to illusion, Rahu is a benevolent teacher, the most benevolent teacher. Rahu is the deepest, most benevolent teacher in this. And Rahu is technically not one of the other planets. Venus is a planet. Venus is here in the third dimension. Mars is here in the third dimension. Jupiter is here in the third dimension. In fact, it is only Jupiter. Jupiter is the only planet that can overtake Rahu in terms of power in this life. Because Jupiter is the definition of selfless spiritual devotion and sacrifice. And Rahu is interested in helping you experience your desires, which is selfish. So this is why if you worship Jupiter, then Rahu will stand next to you and will teach you. Same thing with Shiva. Shiva represents complete detachment, but Shiva also represents complete experience of the third dimension, which is why the Aghoris worship Shiva, because Aghoris are trying to do that. The reason why Aghoris smoke weed isn't because weed makes them spiritual. They're actually going after all of their lower frequency desires and getting rid of them. That's why there really is no such thing as tantric sex, but that's why some of that is associated with that. Because the idea is to go after your desires and experience them. Get it out of your system. Get fulfilled and then walk away from it. And that's why they worship Shiva. Because Shiva represents the awakening that comes from fully integrating with the third dimensional experience without any judgment or attachment. Attachment can go both ways. Attachment is I'm not gonna wear any clothes, and I'm just gonna wear a diaper and walk around, and I won't own anything, even though somehow, even I'm not attached to my body, somehow I get really overweight and I walk around naked and really disgust everybody. But they virtue signal by going, "Oh, look at him, he doesn't care about his body." I forgot. I keep getting off on that. Anyway, where was I? Yeah, so if you have no attachment to illusion, Rahu is a benevolent teacher. So this is what Shiva is all about. This is why Shiva is, I believe, the god to worship now. The god to worship 2,000 years ago was Vishnu, because Vishnu represents the expansion of the third dimension, and that's why Vishnu is associated with living a spiritual life and having, the safety of having all you want, because he protected. He was the protector of the third dimension, because the third dimensional school was in session. And the third dimension, we still had things we needed to learn. So in order to stay here and not be crushed by the third dimensional self-devaluation, the opposite world, the opposite, bizarro world where, we feel isolated and unlovable and irrelevant and controlled and victimized. Those feelings are the exact opposite of the truth. And so in order to survive that, we needed an aspect of the divine that would come and create a protective barrier so that you could go through life and not be crushed by it. But now that we're moving out of the third dimension, and the third dimension is being deleted, probably this month, the final deletion button is going to get hit. I'm not saying that the third dimension will disappear. I'm just saying that, this eclipse is like, they're flipping the switch off. It's they're shutting down the third dimension. And so that's why I think Shiva is the god to worship now, because he is the transformer. And he can destroy this third dimension and transform it into a higher experience. I believe that's why I've been given the Huar mantra, which is absolutely a Shiva mantra. It's destruction and then recreation. Destruction and creation. All right, I think I walked through everything I wanted to talk about. With Rahu. So, I'll see what more he has to say. But like I said, I'm not like channeling him like I'm in trance channeling him. But I'm telling you what he's told me, what he's showed me, and what he's showing me as I'm talking to you. And I'm looking forward to continue to work with him. Him, them, her, whatever. And the power was really amazing. And the bliss, I wouldn't have expected that from Rahu. But the essence of the higher dimensional Rahu is an incredibly blissful being. Because in the higher dimensions, Svarbhanu, the being that is both Rahu and Ketu, is an absolutely gloriously beautiful being. And is so pure that when that being interacts with the third dimension, it creates a destruction, which we perceive as an attack on our essence, which is why we see them as negative. But if we can accept that, no, what's happening is that I'm being transformed to a higher level, then what'll happen is these beings will become extremely healing and beautiful to you. And I see going forward, when we get to a higher frequency, we're going to have a completely different experience of these beings. And they will be tremendously benevolent teachers. They won't be seen as malefics anymore. They will be seen as benefics, the highest of benefics. All right, that's it. I'm all done. I don't see any questions here. Let's see here. A couple of questions. By the way, if you really want to understand what I teach, I got to tell you, if you're just somebody that watches the channel, I'm glad you're here, but you're not going to get the depth of what I'm teaching if you don't do the practices. And so unless you're actually, here going to, here, thunderwizard.com and say doing the lightning qigong every day, or doing the interdimensional meditations, or doing the 5-element Maoshan, or doing if you're not doing those, if you're not really putting energy into that, you're not going to get what I'm teaching. And so I encourage you, if you really want to get your questions answered, the best way to do that is to do the work. And I can tell when somebody's doing the work and when they're not. I can tell almost immediately. Some people, there's a sliding scale, but anyway, I encourage you guys to do the work and not just sit and watch the channel. It's really the actions that change you. Okay, what else? Zink says, hello, Michael. Question, do you now have a preference, Michael or Mahadeva? I've never had a preference. I'll respond to both. If you choose to call me Mahadeva, you will have a higher experience of yourself, because then that will reflect back onto you. You will then activate me on my 5D level. So if you call me Mahadeva, you'll have a higher experience. But it means the same thing. Michael means who is greater than God. It translates to that. Mahadeva means the great God. So it's kind of the same word. But no, I don't have a preference. You can do whatever you want. Zink has another question. Do you have any videos on how to read a Vedic chart? Again, Zink, the fact that you asked that question. Yeah, I do. I've had them for years. I've got courses. I have video courses. I guess I should probably, go here to the new website and make a bunch of videos. But yeah, I've when you go to here, astrology.thunderwizard.com, you're going to find, let me just make sure that it's there. I think there's a link where you can go and take courses. And again, that's why it kind of bothers me when you ask questions you should know. You've been on my channel for so long. Whoops. Astrology. See, I might be apologizing here in a second if I haven't kept up with it, because that's part of it. I don't focus on that. So yeah, astrology.thunderwizard.com, and there's the readings. Let me see, and then it says learn astrology here, and there's a link. Let me click on the link here, see if it takes me somewhere. Yep, and then there are the courses. So yeah, if you could go check out my websites at the bottom, you'll see how to learn from me. Anyway, I don't promote myself nearly enough, so it's not necessarily people's fault for not knowing that. What else? Yes, to answer your question, so if you go here to astrology.thunderwizard.com, scroll to the bottom and click on, you'll see a link there, and where it says here, you'll see a link that you can go and learn how to, and train with me on how to read Vedic astrological charts. Thordis says, wow, this is intense. Yes. Thordis says, I like this definition, very inspiring. Jeffrey Dahmer, yeah, that was the guy. Jeffrey Dahmer is the poster child for not having all of your feelings. That's what happens when you stuff all of your feelings down. You will act on impulses and you will be completely unconscious about it. That's why we have to have all of our feelings. This is the goal of therapy, although therapy for the most part by itself won't accomplish this unless there are actions involved. So going and doing, like being with a therapist is great, bringing up all of your feelings, but then you have to take actions. And this is why the best combination for enlightenment is to work with some kind of therapist, whether it's a shaman or a teacher or a mentor, and working the 12 steps to 5D. If you do both of those things, you can achieve you can achieve enlightenment, which is you can be in a state of having all of your thoughts, all of your feelings. You can be conscious of why you think and feel those things, and then you will be able to take actions completely contrary to your impulses and your agendas and your painful feelings, that will allow you to be healing to yourself and to others, and then you will be literally the most enlightened person on the planet. You will be more enlightened than a person walking around in their underwear, making people virtue signal and taking money from them so that you can build an ashram and have your name over the front of it and have people worship you and call you Bhagwan. I find that whole thing so ridiculous, as you can tell. Because the truth is that anybody can be enlightened if you do those things. And the other thing is, I listen to those people and they try and talk about consciousness, and it's all this nebulous nothing. Like I listen to that, and I listen to their, the everything is the self, and the self is the observer, and I go, that sounds really deep. Now tell me what I can do with that. What do I do with that? I'm the kind of teacher, I will tell you what to do with what I teach you. I will tell you what to do. It's knowledge you will be able to put into practical action that will actually create a shift and a change in you and in your life. I think any teacher that doesn't do that isn't a teacher. Maybe I'm wrong. Let's see. Thordis says, look forward to listening to the first part I missed. My question I have, you probably addressed already. Okay. Thordis, this Rahu Ketu phenomena is new to me and fascinating. The Vedic astrology is a new interest, and I'm looking forward to diving into it. Feeling your deepest desires to the depths and heights, and then still taking it honestly, truly, lightly. Yeah. Yep, that's the whole point of the third dimension, by the way. That's the entire point of the third dimension. And again, I haven't experienced it. I don't believe there's any such thing, again, as an enlightened person, the way we've been taught to believe that they are enlightened. I don't believe they exist. I think at best they're charlatans. At worst, they're con men. And I think that the reason why those kinds of spiritual teachers have disappeared is because human beings have gone past that experiment. That experiment has come to its end. And we're now, my experience and the experience of people who have been experiencing the highest level of energy, which is, for me, the highest level of energy is, direct connection with higher dimensional beings, being taken out of this third dimension. Well, a lot of what we do in the live guided interdimensional meditations, when we do these, I can tell you that in many of those meditations, I'm not here anymore. I'm in a completely different place, and I can feel and experience that I am, beyond, in a place where what we would call, what we used to call enlightenment. But when I come back into my third dimensional body, all my third dimensional stuff is here. It doesn't go away. The idea that we can get rid of all of that, I think, is impossible. I think it's impossible to do that and be at this frequency. So I think anybody that walks around at this frequency is going to have all of those things, because that is part of this frequency. It's impossible to escape it. It is possible to act contrary to it. That is possible. But, again, yeah, I just, whatever we call enlightenment is not in this frequency. It's in the next one. Anyway, that's my thought about that. Okay, I'm all done. Thank you guys for showing up. You know what to do. Listen, I'm like everybody else. I gotta eat. I gotta buy clothes. I gotta pay rent. And so if you like these videos, then I would very much appreciate your support. My deepest thanks to all the people who support me in these two ways. The first way is to, of course, go here to thunderwizard.com or michaeldenny.org or astrology or whatever links I throw out, and actually practically supporting the channel, keeping things going. I really appreciate that. I also deeply appreciate the people who are doing the work. And that means people who are doing the live guided interdimensional meditations, and people who are doing whatever else, doing the 5-element spirit fighting, doing the lightning qigong, doing the meditations from the shop. If you're doing that stuff to whatever level you're doing it, I just want you to know how much I appreciate that. And you probably don't realize how important you are to the entire multiverse. And everything that you do to empower yourself, everything that you do has the hugest impact on light beings all over. There are light beings you've never met who live in other galaxies. When you overcome a block within yourself and you awaken and you achieve a higher connection to your soul desire, there are beings on other planets who experience that. And when the time comes, they will thank you. Just the fact that you were human. There will be a point, remember that I told you, when you leave this reality in whatever way that is, there will be a point where there will be hundreds, thousands, millions of light beings who will be clapping and thanking you profusely because you did something to awaken a greater consciousness level within you. That's why it's so important that you do that. It's more important than anything. It's the only thing that you take with you. When you leave this world, the only thing that you take with you is what you have achieved for yourself spiritually. That goes with you. Everything else disappears and stays here. All right, is that it? That's it. All right, my friends, that's all. I wish you all the best. I love you all. Please be very good to yourselves, and I will see you all very soon.